Hey guys, welcome to the Solution Architect channel. And yes, I'm safely back from my travels, and I want to just show you guys in today's video how to create a release pipeline so we can take our web API that we create, release it to a Linux virtual machine, and then build a Docker image on the virtual machine using the pipeline, and then start and run that Docker container. And I will also show you everything that you need, like the Docker installation on the virtual machine, the .NET Core SDK that you need to install, and the last thing is the Nginx reverse proxy that I'm going to use to show you how we can then call our API at the end of this video and then get the results back from our web API. So let's jump into this. Remember, there's still going to be a competition. Not this specific one. I've got one with a tag on that's brand new, it hasn't been worn, that I'm going to still give away for free at the end of this the series of the DevOps series, deploying to our web API, deploying that through a continuous integration and a continuous deployment pipeline. The next video is going to focus on automated testing, everything we need to know about automated testing. And the last video, I'll put together everything from the start to the end and run a complete pipeline deploying our web API. So let's jump into this video and hope you enjoy this. So we're in Azure DevOps. This is the Azure repos, the source code files that we're going to deploy from the previous video. Now back to Microsoft Azure portal, and what we need to do here is create a virtual machine for Linux. Go to compute and then virtual machine, and then we select our resource group and we select type in the virtual machine name. And then just make sure you change this to a cheaper version. I don't want to pay that much, so I'm just going to get one with 1 CPU and 1 gig of RAM. Select that. That will work out a little bit cheaper. I'm not going to have this open. So we're going to just use the username and password to connect via SSH and not a public key. Otherwise I have to go create a public key just to put in the username. Admin won't work. Let's put in DevOps. My password. It can't be a simple password, it needs to conform to a standard here. And then allow SSH on port 22. Click next. We don't want to use premium SSD, that's going to be too expensive, so just use normal HDD. And next. And just make sure we've got a virtual network, we've got a subnet in there, which is just a local subnet that it's going to run on. That's the public IP. You want to have a public IP to be able to connect to that. Click next. Just leave everything default in here. Don't change anything, just leave it default. And click next. Keep that also default. Next. With no tags, we're not going to use a tag. And then review this. Make sure you're not going to pay that much and click create. And then we'll wait for the resource to be started. So I'm in Microsoft Azure portal, and on CLI, the Cloud Shell, I'm going to just log into my virtual machine. And there's a few things that you need to install. So what I'm going to do is, I've already installed this because it does take time, and I don't want to end up having a 30-minute video. But you need to ensure you install two things. You need to install Docker, and you also need to install .NET Core SDK. So I'm going to quickly show you the Docker version. And what I will do is I will leave the installation in a README file on the description below. Just go check for that. There's going to be a few links. A link to install Docker and a link to install .NET. So you also need to have the .NET version installed. And you can see I have installed SDK 2.1. And there's a reason, you know, I've struggled a little bit with 3.1. I'm going to play with it maybe later, but with running Docker 3.1 on you know, .NET 3.1 on Docker was a little bit of issue for me. I'm not sure why. So you need to have these two installed, and then also I'll show you now the different configuration settings. Also install Nginx for a reverse proxy. How that works, and then I'll show you the pipeline again. So we're going to install Nginx right now. Sudo update first. We do apt update always before you install anything. And then sudo apt install Nginx. And yes. Now let's check the status. System status Nginx. And you can see it's active and up and running. Now I'm just going to clear the screen, and then let's just check the view of what is returning back from localhost. This is the default from Nginx. You can see it's up and running. And now we're going to configure our Nginx. So we just need to edit the default view. Just sudo nano etc. Yep, and Nginx. Sites available and /default. And that will return the configuration for Nginx. So we just going to, I'm just going to copy and paste inside here, and what you need to hide here as well. So you can just copy and paste this. I will have a link in the description where to find this. And this is just to route the listen port, which is 80, to the local host. Just want to clear this up a little bit. To localhost, and then we used port 5000 as the host for our Docker container. I'm going to show you just now. Just clear up all of that. Make sure everything else is hidden and you've got all your curly brackets lined up. And just going to show you then what else to be hidden. This is the forward header that we put in, that we can put into the code as well. I'm going to show you right now the changes we need to make in the startup.cs file. Just hide all of this. And then save. Okay, so what we want to do next is stop the service. I just need to sudo service Nginx and stop. And after that we need to start the service, And then let's check the status of the service, make sure it's up and running. And Bob's your uncle, it's up and running. Now we are back in Visual Studio. Go to your code, go to startup.cs, and we add HTTP overrides in there. ASP Net Core HTTP overrides. And then we'll go and make the changes to the code needed. Now go to configure, go to that and copy and paste this in. This is the forward headers that we need to be able to forward the HTTP request to a different port. The next step is then go to and add using .microsoft or system.net, and then go down to configuration services and copy and paste this in. This is the known proxy that we're going to use as default. Now back onto your Azure DevOps portal, go to releases, and we want to create an empty job. Select empty job, and then the artifact that we want to select here is Azure repo. So we want to use just our files. There's several ways of doing this. I'm just going to select the source code, copy the source code over, just select the latest and click add. So we're going to start a new task. The first task is, so first select Ubuntu 18.04, that's our default agent, and then add a new task, and then search for SSH command. So what we're going to achieve here is, first I'm going to make sure that the target is empty, to remove the folder on the server if there's already a folder. There's a few other things that I also probably need to do in the next step, but let's just do that. Make sure that the folder is selected. You need to manage your service connection. If you haven't done that, you need to create a service connection to your Linux VM. And the command in here is just simple. We're just going to clear, remove the folder on the Linux virtual machine. Just sudo rm -r and WebAPI. That's our default folder. And save. Okay, and then we're going to add a new task. Click plus again. And then this time we want to copy all the source files to our virtual machine. We're going to use copy files over SSH. Click add, go in there. Let's make the name change. So this is a secure way of copying. I use a username and password in my service connection, but you can use a key as well to do that. The source folder, we select our source, just the default folder there. All these files we need to copy over. It needs to have the Docker file. So everything needs to go ***, and then Web API is our target window. There is advanced. You can also click and clean target. I found that not really working that well. That's why I have the SSH in the front there for our first task. So second task is done, and then let's create our last task to build a Docker image, and also to run the Docker image. So we're going to use SSH for that as well. And this time just change it to build Docker image and start. We use our same service connection. And then this time we're not going to use commands, or you can use a file as well if you want to use a file. We can just use the inline script. because if you do certain activities like CD Web API, then the inline script work with that. That's ls is just listing what's in that. Just make sure that is starting it up. That's building the, and this one is going to run it, started up. It needs to be 5000. That's our default port. And then we need to have a bind to the 0.0.0.0 4 zeros. And what that bind does, it actually binds your Docker runtime to the Nginx that we've configured. And that will give you the ability to view that values that's coming back from your API. Let's save this and let's create a release. And create, and we'll go to release and check out as it runs. We'll just start it up and then deploy, and then as soon as it's done, I'll show you the progress. Okay, so everything was done complete successfully, and let's just check. The Docker was built, the image was built, and now we'll go back to our Azure portal. And this is in the Linux virtual machine, our virtual machine, and let's check if everything is running. So just want to check to see if values is coming back from localhost, and the port we used is 5000. And remember, this is API/values. This is how you see it on a Linux machine, and not just values. You have to have API in front there. And let's check our Docker images. You'll see that the Docker image has been deployed, and then the container is the runtime. So let's check the Docker container list. What is there is the runtime, and there's my web API that I've deployed through the pipeline. Okay, so the last tip I'm going to give you, and this is free of charge, you don't have to pay for it. If you want to see you call your API from externally, remember your Linux machine has an IP address, and I'm just going to minimize here, go to my Linux VM. It's got an IP address. This IP address won't exist after this video has been released, but if you want to get this just out of the box, try and call it, say for example, in your pipe 500 API.values, this won't work. You'll just get an error. So the best thing to do is to go to your virtual machine, go to networking, and you need to allow that port inside networking. So you need to add a port rule, you add an inbound rule, and you can say source from anywhere. Just change this 8080 to 5000 because that's your port. This is a TCP port, and you allowed this. Just change the name to 5000, and you say add. And that rule will then be applied to your networking for this virtual machine. Okay, so now you have this IP address. This might take a minute or so, so don't be too quick to come back to this and try it again. It took about a minute for me to reset and make that port available, and then you can see your values is returning back from your API if you allow that networking. Go back to Azure, this port here. So this is not a good idea unless you do have something that anybody can call this API, but you want to have control. So I would recommend you use OAuth credentials to authorize people using your APIs, and we can maybe do that in a later video. I'm just going to delete that port, and that's it. If you've got anything, guys, that you want to ask me about this, please leave a comment below and I can try and help you out. So please subscribe and please share my videos if you like it, and please click the like button, and let's get more subscribers on this channel so I can get more content out to you. Thank you very much. If you've got any special request, please put it down in the comments below, and I'll try and help you out as soon as possible. Thank you.